Namasami. So I thought this evening, with Luang Pa's encouragement to not feel obligated every week to give a formal Dhamma reflection, and to doing some readings every now and then seems like a good thing to do. So I thought I would share a few readings this evening. One that I've kind of had hanging around for a while is an essay that Ajahn Sucitto sent to me once, sometime last year, when I was asking him some questions over the email, and he kindly answered them and also attached a sort of an essay. I don't think it's published. It may be on his blog somewhere, but it's one that I found very nicely phrased in how he explained some issues. Is there a little more light here? Ah, that's good. Thanks. I think I'm going to have to hold this a little closer. So I had asked him just some general questions about some terms and how he was using them, or how he was understanding them, regarding various aspects of some of the Pali terms that explain how mind works, in different components of the cognition process, and some of the different mental factors, like the five basic ones: contact, feeling, perception, attention, intention. Anyway, it just sort of was a kind of a long email of questions back and forth, and he answered them very nicely, but also attached this other essay called Mindfulness, Its Friends and Relatives, which was, I thought, quite nice, and thought maybe people would enjoy hearing his words and his thoughts about mindfulness, because it's become such a popularized term that's referring to many different things these days, and people have many different ideas of what mindfulness actually is. We were talking about it, I think, just at tea time or something the other day. So I'll just go ahead and read this. Mindfulness is friends and relatives. What does mindfulness mean? The term mindfulness has become a buzzword in recent years. We hear of mindfulness being used in many ways to increase calm, to rectify attention disorders, and to offer emotional stability. It is employed in a number of ways: mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, mindfulness-based childbirth, mindfulness for sports people, mindfulness for businessmen, and mindfulness in the military. And I'll just add my own. There's quite a few more things that are not quite so even beautiful as this. A calm, collected emotional state and a clear present moment attention can have many applications to improve how a human being functions. And mindfulness is commonly understood to provide just that. In terms of its popularity, in the West at least, it has outgrown, and often doesn't even acknowledge, its ancient Buddhist parent with all her religious mannerisms. Understandably so, recent accounts of Buddhist fundamentalist attacks on Muslims in Burma and Sri Lanka offer a deeply disappointing vision of how even Buddhism can get swamped by views. But what is mindfulness? Is it a technique of noting, a moment at a time, phenomena that arise within an unwaveringly focused attention? Finding the rigor of this approach too rigid and stressful, some teachers have espoused a less object-centered approach of tuning into awareness itself. an approach that is backed up in Tibetan Dzogchen practice or in Advaita Vedanta, but which finds less secure ground in the Pali texts of Theravada. So this can be confusing for people who are approaching mindfulness through the Pali Canon. One problem seems to be that of taking the method through which mindfulness is applied microscopically, a method taught by acknowledged masters such as the Mahasi Sayadaw and Sayadaw U Pandita, and a foundation for Goenka and Western Vipassana teachers, to be mindfulness itself. But to swing the other way and to say the mindfulness is just being aware in the present seems to miss a salient feature of what the texts and the practice are about. Mindfulness entails more than being choicelessly aware in the present moment. Take, for example, and this is a quote from Majjhima 53, "He possesses the highest mindfulness and skill. He recollects and remembers what was done long ago and spoken long ago." Here, the mindful practitioner, keen to follow the teachings, brings them to mind to act as a frame of reference of his or her present experience. So, mindfulness has a referential quality. It connects present moment experience to a frame of reference. The teachings on the four establishments, or bases, of mindfulness exemplify this. Mindfulness of body, feeling, mind state, and mental qualities in the establishment of mindfulness discourses, Majjhima 10 and Digha 22, is a referential practice. In these suttas, mindfulness is the kind of attention that refers bodily experience to the body, feeling to the realm of feeling, the current state of mind to the domain of mind, and mental qualities. Mental qualities, potentials such as ill will or goodwill that support mind states, to themselves, just as they are. Why? Because in this way, which is called the direct path for the disappearance of pain and grief, for the realization of nibbana, one isn't referring them to myself and how I should look and why is my mind in this state and so on, nor is one distracting oneself, spacing out, or suppressing mind states. This reference, bare of judgment and self-representation, is of course at the heart of mindfulness as a therapeutic tool. It clears out the misreference of judgment, of feeling bad about one's body and so on, which always adds some self-bias in its assessments. In the practice of the four establishments, mindfulness replaces that tension and reactivity with clarity and calm. That steady calm allows mind states to unravel to the great unbinding of nibbana. Right view, virtue, and attention. Reference to an object in and of itself is then part of what mindfulness offers. But in mindfulness as a factor for liberation, there's more to it than that. The texts present mindfulness as being accompanied by other factors. I call them friends and relatives. Some or all of whom tag along with mindfulness so that motivation and application is clear and that there is a learning from what the frame of reference presents. For instance, take mindfulness in the Eightfold Path. It's only one factor of an unfolding process which begins with right view and leads on through right speech and right action, through right mindfulness and into samadhi, right unification of mind. In this process, the most important factor is right view, the wise perspective that reminds us that everything we say, do, or even think has results, for good or for bad. This view is the basis and the motivation behind cultivating one's life. there is the result of good and bad deeds. Right view affirms that we can enter on a good way through being fully and responsibly conscious. It motivates us to pay attention. Mindfulness then carries right view into living experience by highlighting the mind states that are the causes and results of our actions. It gets the mind to see which ones are for our true benefit. Then, in terms of attention, there are teachings such as, quote from Sucitto, "When your virtue is well purified and your view is straight, based upon virtue, established upon virtue, you should develop the 4 establishments of mindfulness." Sucitto 47:15. The act of paying attention is qualified. This instruction isn't about merely noting an object. The requirement to establish virtue and awareness of the causes and effects of one's actions indicate that in Dhamma practice, it's not enough to notice that one's body is doing something and sensations are arising, but how and why. Robbing a bank or slaughtering a chicken might require clarity, focus, and calm, but they wouldn't be themes for right mindfulness, although there is such a thing as wrong, Chah mindfulness. Because they don't reveal the accompanying mental quality, in this case the qualities of avarice, shamelessness, and harmfulness. So, for right mindfulness, the attentive aspect of mind has to connect with felt awareness of one's approach and intention. This is because, taken on its own, attention is amoral. Assassins can cultivate it to a high degree. But attention is not mindfulness. Attention, manasikara, is the aspect of mind that is operated through manas, mind as rational, object-defining tool. This is the function that gets tuned to high degrees of efficiency and speed. People racing through piles of data, people rapidly trading stocks and shares, people behind screens, scanning and taking notes, have high degrees of attention and rapid reference. But what they're not referring to is their own awareness, mind as heart or citta. Clear comprehension and deep attention. Citta is the mind of feelings and impressions and of how I am. Mind as an empathic awareness. It is the all-important focus of mindfulness, because if it is steadied and cleared of wrong views and unknowing, there is liberation. So mindfulness refers the objects of attention to this mental awareness or heart, to know what it is being affected by, and how that affect arises and passes. This knowledge is called clear comprehension or full knowing, sampajanya. It is a vital relative of mindfulness, one that gives it a crucial role in mind cultivation, and in fact, in our well-being. Through lack of the knowing that arises through mindful reference to citta, people lose themselves in what grabs attention or get stressed out. In both cases, they lose full contact with their awareness, even to the extent of not knowing that in that a steady basis is available. Therefore, we have rampant social and individual disease, anxiety, stress, and depression, because our systems and cultures have lost touch with awareness and the ease that is its fundamental nature. Instead, the message is that happiness and success only come through chasing and acquiring what's out there, all of which agitates the citta. And the scenario out there is that as soon as you get and become something, then that's out of date, so get a new one and develop a bit more. This is the world of surface, of which the touch screen is the icon. Contact is instant, glassy, and lacking depth. You just bounce from one thing to the next. In such a scenario, there's no inner home, just a center that remains swampy, hungry, and restless. That's why right mindfulness is vital. If there is one life-saving feature that I'd say mindfulness is about, is that it connects manas, the object definer, to citta, awareness, the subjective sense. Mindfulness is there in the moment of holding the question, how am I with this? If we liken the mind to a hand, attention is like the fingers, and citta is like the palm. Fingers can probe, twiddle, and touch, but are unable to collect anything. The palm can't probe and inquire, but it receives, collects, and fully feels what the fingers place in it. So citta has a storekeeper's wisdom. It wants to know what is worth being in touch with, what can be held for one's welfare. It certainly needs educating, and that is the function of deep or wise attention, yoniso manasikara. The attention that selects which sense data mindfulness should bear in mind. There is a huge amount of stuff that the mind can potentially linger in or get lost in. So deep attention is another friend of mindfulness. It requires skillful intention and clarifies what you're experiencing. Deep attention means that rather than note every thought that runs through your head, you get to the point. What is the overall trend here in one word? Restlessness, anxiety, irritation, friendliness. Then mindfulness bears that mind state in mind, lets it sit in awareness. So when right view and deep attention guide mindfulness, it draws manas and citta together. You know where your actions and thoughts are coming from. You're ethically tuned. If deep attention prepares the ground for mindfulness, clear comprehension, or full knowing, helps you to more fully meet and come to terms with what you're experiencing. For example, as you attend to how your body feels and how you sense it internally, you establish mindfulness of body. By directing your attention to how your body feels in itself, you establish the embodied sense that gets you grounded and stable. You more fully get to know what the body is about. It's not just a visual object that you compare with others or worry about. With clear comprehension, you know it not as a self-image, but as a base of consciousness and a resource for the mind. That replaces a source of anxiety and passion with something you can use to notice and understand how you're being affected. Because as you get embodied, feeling, both physical and mental, becomes more evident. Then if you attend to feeling in itself without rejecting, resisting, or sinking into it, you're mindful of how agreeable and disagreeable mental feeling both change. Clear comprehension makes you less reactive. Consequently, as the mind state of complaining or exaggerating or fascination is no longer supported, it too passes. The mind is left clear and balanced. There's another life changer. You don't have to feel cheerful and bright all the time. And when the mind is low, you don't have to make a person out of it. Through mindfulness and full knowing of mental feelings and states, their true nature is revealed. They're not a self, not fixed things at all. If you get to fully know the mind, you know it goes through moods, but they change and you can arrive at clarity. Samadhi and wisdom. So this reference and the full knowing that it supports opens and clarifies the heart. As the various reactions and distractions die down, The fingers of attention and the palm of awareness can meet with no aim and object other than that meeting. Then you have samadhi. The mind is unified. Through mindfulness, attention comes home to awareness. And finding that this is a very comfortable place to be, intention settles into appreciation and ease. But of greater significance in the long run, mindfulness is involved with wisdom. It may be correct to say that mindfulness is non-judgmental, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't support assessment. It is in the putting aside self-judgments and short-term impulses, quote, covetousness and grief regarding the world, that an assessment of what is really useful can take place. So to avoid having its attention hijacked, mindfulness has to be established and made firm. One image is of a man carrying a bowl of oil on his head with another walking behind him with a sword ready to cut his head off if he spills a drop. To paraphrase the Buddha, if even the most beautiful girl in the world sings and dances in front of him, would he give her any attention? This is from the Sucitto 47. No, his mindfulness is firmly established on balance, the key to clear assessment of what is really needed or true in any situation. It's fortunate that this head-lopping technique is not offered in meditation retreats. Instead, we make our way supported by the energy of patient persistence, the ability to keep beginning again without getting sidetracked by self-criticism or doubt. Mindfulness has to be established and reestablished through patience and a lot of kind encouragement so that the fingers of attention don't keep grabbing hot coal. Knowing what burns or stabs the heart or entangles it with no benefit is up to each of us to find out. But to keep that patient persistence going, mindfulness needs enthusiasm or eagerness. In this way, persistence, or energy, virya, and eagerness, atapi, become two more members of the mindfulness team. They're important assets in their own right. People get put off by the idea of making an effort, but right energy comes from interest and fullness of heart, not blind will. When you feel obliged to work at things that are not meaningful, effort is tiresome and difficult to sustain. But when something gives us good results or is interesting to do, then energy is not a problem. So we need to recall and be mindful of why we do what we do, whether that's cultivating samadhi or cooking. Keep it relevant. Get interested in how your mind or body work. Use mindfulness with interest. Then the application of right effort is a way of coming more fully into your life. It takes mindfulness to ride a bike, and to do so reliably and well in any weather requires persistence. So with mindfulness, you learn how to know and how to support your body and to train, encourage, gladden, and soothe the mind in a range of activities. Right effort and right mindfulness give rise to a pragmatic wisdom that makes a decade of persistence worthwhile. But they're also about the present with immediate results, to be more fully and knowingly here. What else is mindfulness about than that? Transcendence, that's what. In another parable, Sucitto 47:8, the Buddha presents the examples of two cooks. Both present their master, the king, with his meal, but one does and one does not notice what food the king enjoys. The one who doesn't notice serves the same food every day regardless, and gets fired. The one who notices what food the king chooses from the meal continues to refine the meal he prepares in line with what most satisfies his master, and gets promoted. The parable then likens these to the way that two bhikkhus, who are both described as being mindful and clearly comprehending, present a meditation theme to their minds. Of the two, the foolish, incompetent bhikkhu doesn't note how his mind responds, so he gets no good results. but the wise, competent bhikkhu takes note, and his corruptions are abandoned. This makes the point that mindfulness needs to attend to, quote, the sign of the mind. This is beautiful, as it clears itself of its burdens and inner conflicts. The citta will present subtle signs of luminosity, ease, vastness, or stillness. Any of these may be a key to be picked up, held, and explored. So we need to look and feel more deeply to what meditation theme it picks up readily and enjoys, rather than keep blindly plugging away. Picking up the sign of the mind is the entry to the mystical experience, when the heart attunes to a felt sense that isn't coming from one's normal personality programs. The required fine-tuning comes through another of mindfulness's friends, one that tastes the mental qualities that support any state of mind. This is investigation of qualities, Dhammavichaya. It has to be applied to the citta, as in, quote, what effect is this having on my mind? Or, what is there at the periphery of attention? Sometimes through tunnel vision, we miss the most important messages that the citta is telling us, like, I'm pinched and pressurized, or, it's time to just enjoy this. The spirit of investigation encourages us to assess the mind at any time. For example, can my mind find focus on this aspect of breathing, or does it settle more readily while walking? Or is this the time when kindness is a more suitable place in which to dwell? Through investigation, the corruptions of forcefulness, ambition, or our ideas about what we should be experiencing get weeded out. They are replaced by a more subtle invitation into truth. In this way, citta educates manas in the ways of directly experienced wisdom. And manas pays back by casting that wisdom into concepts that form the storehouse of one's contemplative know-how. Without mindful reference, awakening, wisdom, and even genuine kindness are just concepts and ideals that remain out of reach. And without its supportive companions, mindfulness doesn't penetrate much deeper than granting an improved quality of attention. And on the other hand, as a member of a team, mindfulness frees the mind from the burden of self-consciousness, self-hatred, and self-orientation, the shift that is the heart of awakening. Sometimes it's the case that practitioners cultivate this team naturally. You don't need to know all their names. But when the mind is like a hand, you do need to consider what you're picking up, whether you're pushing, stroking, or grabbing, and how to turn things over with curiosity. It's up to you. For some, it may, as with Hatha Yoga, become another commodity that improves people's capacity to work on the same treadmill as before. For others, it will bring fresh life to its forgetful Buddhist parent. I think that means she should have said forgotten Buddhist parent. And for others, it's an open opportunity. Eventually, how we use it is our own ongoing responsibility. So, a few wise words from Ajahn Sucitto on mindfulness and its accompaniments. I thought I'd also do kind of a change in tone, pace of a few readings from the Ajahn Chah biography, Stillness Flowing. This is from the chapter, or the section called The Heart of the Matter, which moves into Luang Por Chah's teachings on meditation, contemplation. And it's a very long section, and so I'm just going to read a few excerpts that come right towards the end, just as a way to round out some of the teachings on reflection, contemplation, meditation, kind of follow on Ajahn Sucitto's reading a bit. This subsection is called Samatha and Vipassana. In the Theravada tradition, most of the discourse concerning the two chief aspects of Buddhist meditation practice, the calming of the mind and the cultivation of wisdom, has revolved around the terms samatha and vipassana. Samatha means tranquility, serenity, lucid calm. Vipassana literally means clear seeing and refers to insight into the three characteristics of existence. Although the Buddha himself did not use these terms with any great frequency, they gained much prominence in the centuries following his death. Their meaning expanded to include not only the states themselves, but also the practices directly aimed at cultivating them. Focusing on a mantra, for example, came to be called a samatha practice, whereas investigating the impermanent nature of feelings, a vipassana practice. The two terms have long been the subject of scholarly controversy. Disagreements have tended to center on the relationship between the two. In particular, as mentioned in an earlier section, the extent to which the lucid calm of samatha must be developed before an authentic vipassana insight can occur. When referring to these terms, Luang Por would speak of them as two aspects of practice that were developed in unison rather than two separate entities. Just as an axe needed to be made with both sufficient weight and sharpness to do its job, so the mind that could penetrate the truth of things needed both stability and discernment. Nevertheless, given that the focus in the early stages of practice is suppression of the hindrances and, in its culminating phase, insight into the nature of things, Luang Por recognized a shift of emphasis which he would characterize as an organic process of maturation. It occurred the way, he said, that an unripe mango became ripe, or a child became an adult. From one point of view, the adult might be seen as an altogether different person to the child, and from another, as an evolved version of the same person. In a similar but more earthly analogy, Luang Por compared the relationship to that between food and excrement. Luang Por also coined the terms pacification of mind and pacification of defilements to clarify his view of the necessary relationship between samatha and vipassana. Quote, "When we develop samadhi, we pacify the mind. But the life of the pacified mind is short. Because it can't withstand a lot of things going on, it lacks true ease. You go to a quiet place and pacify your mind. But the defilements are still there. They haven't been pacified. This is where the distinction can be made. The pacification of the mind and the pacification of the defilements are two different things. The mind can become peaceful easily enough when there are few disturbances. But if it feels some kind of threat, then it can't. There's something still there. You can't let go. You can't put it down." End of quote. Meditators who took refuge in refined states of mind and feared anything that might disturb the bliss of their samadhi tended to become trapped in doomed attempts to manipulate conditions in order to maintain them. The boldness required to look closely at forms, sounds, odors, tastes, tangible objects, and mental states would be lacking in them, and their defilements left untouched. In contrast, meditators, at peace after a training in which the calming and wisdom elements had been developed in tandem, would have no fear of sense contact as such, and could let go of attachment at the moment of contact with great fluency. They created no owner of their experience. Luang Por said at this stage the practice was fitting to be called Vipassana, clear seeing of things in their true light. Quote, "These conventional expressions, Samatha and Vipassana, if you want to discuss them separately, you can. But if you want to talk about their relationship, then you have to say that they're inseparable. They're connected. A layperson once came and asked me if these days I was teaching people to practice Samatha or Vipassana. I said, I don't know. They're trained together. If you answer in terms of what actually happens in the mind, then you have to answer like that. Develop them simultaneously because they are synonymous. If you develop samadhi without wisdom, it won't last long." In one of his most celebrated discourses, Luang Por captured this idea with a simile. Wisdom is the movement of samadhi. It's like the phrase, still flowing water. The samatha and vipassana of someone who has developed right practice are in harmony and concord, and flow like a single stream of water. In the mind of the practitioner, it's as if still water is flowing. The peace of samadhi incorporates wisdom. There is sila, samadhi, and panya together. Wherever you sit, it is still and yet it flows. It is still flowing water. There is samadhi and panya, samatha and vipassana. The development of insight. On one occasion, Luang Por taught about the development of insight in terms of the two jhana factors of vitakka and vichara. He said that with the mind in a state of calm, a thought might arise, vitakka, prompting appreciation of it, vichara, resulting in rapture, which would then propel the mind into a deeper state of lucid calm. On the passing away of that state, the appreciation could resume. If you maintain awareness, you'll get this is a quote, if you maintain awareness, you'll get a report from the scene. It's similar to there being a person in a house with 6 windows. You stand outside watching the windows. From outside, you see someone appearing at one window and then someone else at another, and you assume that there's 6 people in the house. In fact, it's all just the one person moving from window to window. That one person is named 3 characteristics. Everything is unstable. The 3 characteristics of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self are the object of vipassana. Penetrating them will cut off all doubts. End of quote. As the practice of contemplating whatever phenomena arose in the calm, lucid mind as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self progressed, the meditator would experience a disjunction between the knowing and that which was known. Quote, "It's not that you have to force this disjunction. Through the abandonment, the putting down of attachment, the mind and its object become automatically disjoined." End of quote. At this stage, Luang Por said that the distinction between the mind and its present object was like that between water and oil. The separation allowed for a constant examination of phenomena. Quote, "If you take your mind to this point, wherever you go, the mind will be analyzing." This is the enlightenment factor called investigation of Dhamma. It rolls along by itself, and you talk with yourself. You resolve and release the feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness that arise. Nothing can get close to the mind. It has its work to do. This happens naturally. It's not something that you can contrive. Luang Por said that it was at this stage that the Buddha's teachings on the foundations of mindfulness become clear. When the membrane connecting the knowing from the known has been cut, then the meditator saw the body in the body, feelings in feelings, states of mind in states of mind, and wholesome and unwholesome dhammas in wholesome and unwholesome dhammas. In other words, they were seen clearly for what they were without superimposing upon them an independent, self-existent owner. Beyond the monkey. One sign that the practice was on the right path was the feeling of sober sadness that arose through constant contemplation of the three characteristics, which evolves into nibbida, or disenchantment. An illumination, this is a quote, illumination takes place and then disenchantment sets in. Disenchantment with this body and mind, disenchantment with things that arise and pass away and are unstable. You feel it wherever you are. When the mind is disenchanted, its sole interest is in finding the way out of all those things. It sees the suffering inherent in the world, the suffering inherent in life. When the mind has entered this state, then wherever you sit, there's nothing but impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. There's nowhere to take hold of anything anymore. If you sit at the foot of a tree, you hear a discourse from the Buddha. If you go to a mountain, you hear a discourse from the Buddha. You see all trees as just one tree. You see all creatures as of one species. You see that nothing deviates from this truth, that all things come into existence, become established, begin to change, and then cease. Luang Por made clear that the disenchantment that he was referring to was not an expression of aversion, for that would have been simply another expression of craving. This disenchantment was the feeling that arose through seeing how mistaken it had been to consider impermanent phenomena as self or belonging to self. It was waking up from the enchantment of body and mind. Luang Por maintained that Meine, awareness of the present mental object as changeful, fluid, unreliable, of uncertain outcome, was the unerring guide right from the very beginning of meditation practice until its final conclusion. When mental objects were recognized as changeful, he said, it was like breaching the boat of conceit below the waterline. The sense I am listed to one side and sunk. Luang Por taught that complete liberation of the mind was the result of creating a momentum where the tirelessly repeated inner contemplation of the three characteristics in a mind freed from the hindrances was complemented by a steady effort to be mindful and alert to the three characteristics in daily life. Eventually, the constant repetition and increased profundity of the contemplation reached a tipping point and bore fruit. When the mind has completely seen through personality view, all doubts and attachments to precepts and practices disappear. And now the mind of the practitioner is, quote, in the world, but not of it. Luang Por made a comparison with the natural separation of oil and paint in a bottle. Quote, you are living in the world and following the conventions of the world, but without attaching to them. When you have to go somewhere, you say you are going. When you're coming, you say you are coming. Whatever you are doing, you use the conventions and language of the world, but it's like the two liquids in the bottle. They are in the same bottle, but don't mix together. You live in the world, but at the same time you remain separate from it. The mind doesn't create things around sense contact. Once contact has occurred, you automatically let go. The mind discards the experience. This means that if you are attracted to something, you experience the attraction in the mind, but don't attach or hold fast onto it. If you have a reaction of aversion, there is simply the experience of aversion arising in the mind and nothing more. There isn't any sense of self arising that attaches and gives meaning and importance to the aversion. In other words, the mind knows how to let go. It knows how to set things aside. Why is it able to let go and put things down? Because the presence of insight means you can clearly see the harmful results that come from attaching to all those mental states. When you see forms, the mind remains undisturbed. When you hear sounds, it remains undisturbed. The mind neither takes a position for or against any sense objects experienced. This is the same for all sense contact, whether it be through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind. Whatever thoughts arise in the mind can't disturb you. You are able to let go. You may perceive something as desirable, but you don't attach to that perception or give it any special importance. It simply becomes a condition of mind to be observed without attachment. This is what the Buddha described as experiencing sense objects as just that much. The sense bases are still functioning and experiencing sense objects, but without the process of attachment stimulating movements to and fro in the mind. Having gained such clear and penetrating insight means it is sustained at all times, whether you are sitting meditation with your eyes closed, or even if you are doing something with your eyes open. Whatever situation you find yourself in, be it in formal meditation or not, the clarity of insight remains. When you have unwavering mindfulness of the mind within the mind, you don't forget yourself. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, the awareness within makes it impossible to lose mindfulness. It's a state of awareness that prevents you forgetting yourself. Mindfulness has become so strong that it is self-sustaining to the point where it becomes the natural state of mind. These are the results of training and cultivating the mind, and it is here where you go beyond doubt. Luang Por said that realizing that the constant arising and passing away of all phenomena in accordance with causes and conditions is a fixed, invariable truth, is to find the only kind of permanence that exists. Realizing this truth of an unchanging changefulness is, he said, the end of the path that needs to be followed. In terms of the Four Noble Truths, the framework for all of Luang Por's practice and teaching, by bringing the 8 factors of the Noble Path to maturity, suffering is comprehended, and with the factors sustaining suffering abandoned, suffering ceases. Luang Por said, it is as if an arrow has been pulled out of your heart. Okay, so leave it there for this evening's readings.
Andamayam Mavanakataya Sadhu Karantadamase Sadhu 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 Anumodam.
Okay.